somewhere beyond the edge of the known world. There was once said to be a powerful kingdom, filled with gold, technology, and towering temples. A paradise built by gods, ruled by men, and then, in a single day and night, it vanished beneath the waves. For centuries, people called it a myth, a fantasy created by ancient philosophers. But now, scientists, explorers, and even satellite imagery suggest otherwise. Could it be? Have we finally found the real city of Atlantis? Long before treasure hunters dove into oceans and Netflix made documentaries about ancient civilizations, there was one story that sparked more curiosity, controversy, and obsession than perhaps any other in history: the legend of Atlantis. It all began not with a map or a scroll, but with a philosopher, a man named Plato, writing nearly 2,400 years ago in ancient Greece. You might know him from philosophy textbooks, but he wasn't just asking questions about life and logic, he was also telling stories. And in two of his most famous works, Timaeus and Critias, he drops a bombshell of a tale that still shakes historians to this day. Plato claimed that 9,000 years before his own time, there existed a mighty empire, Atlantis, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This was no ordinary kingdom. He described it as a massive island nation, larger than Libya and Asia combined, a land overflowing with natural resources, advanced technology, stunning architecture, and yes, an army capable of conquering the world. Atlantis was ruled by a dynasty of kings descended from the god Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea. According to the tale, Poseidon fell in love with a mortal woman named Cleito, and together they had 5 pairs of twin sons. These 10 sons went on to rule the 10 regions of Atlantis, creating a civilization that, at least on paper, sounded like the blueprint of a utopia. Imagine a city of concentric circles, rings of land and water perfectly engineered, bridges connecting each ring, palaces plated in gold and silver, temples that touch the skies, and deep within the heart of the city, a sacred temple to Poseidon himself, where a giant statue of the sea god stood tall, riding a chariot drawn by winged horses. Atlantis had it all: power, beauty, wisdom, and perhaps that was its downfall. As Plato tells it, over time, the Atlanteans grew greedy and arrogant. They started waging wars, expanding their empire, and ignoring the divine values they were built upon. Their once great society, which had been guided by balance and justice, spiraled into corruption. And then came the punishment. In a chilling line that has echoed through the centuries, Plato wrote that Atlantis was destroyed by a single day and night of misfortune. A series of violent earthquakes and floods struck the island, and it sank into the sea, vanishing without a trace, gone, just like that. Now here's where the debate begins. Was Plato recounting an actual historical event, a true memory passed down over generations? Or was he simply creating a moral allegory, a fictional story meant to teach a lesson about the dangers of pride and power? That question has haunted scholars, scientists, and adventurers for centuries. Some say he invented Atlantis to criticize the politics of Athens. Others believe he drew inspiration from real disasters, like the eruption of Santorini, which wiped out the Minoan civilization. But the descriptions he gave, the size of the island, the layout of the city, the specific geographic clues, they were so detailed, so strangely precise, that many still wonder, what if he wasn't making it up? Over the years, Atlantis became more than just a legend. It became a mystery, a symbol, even an obsession. Writers, artists, and explorers all painted their own versions of what it could have looked like. And as science advanced, so did the search. Today, that search continues, from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean to the deserts of Africa, even to outer space, using satellite imaging to look for circular ruins buried beneath the earth. But at its core, the tale of Atlantis is more than a lost city. It's a story about human ambition, our rise, our fall, and our endless thirst to discover what lies beyond the edge of the map. And maybe, just maybe, it's not as mythical as we once thought. Okay, so Atlantis was powerful, mysterious, maybe even real, but what did it actually look like? Plato didn't just give us a name and a scary ending. He painted a picture, a city unlike any other in human history, a city that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but was supposedly built 11,000 years ago. According to his writings, Atlantis wasn't just one city, it was an entire empire, ruled from a magnificent capital in the center of the island. This capital wasn't random or messy like many ancient cities. It was engineered, mathematically precise, laid out in concentric circles, rings of land and water, perfectly symmetrical. Imagine flying above it. You'd see a giant bullseye carved into the earth, 3 rings of water separated by 2 rings of land, all connected by bridges and canals. The outermost ring had harbors for ships. The middle ring held homes, gardens, and markets. And at the center, surrounded by water and accessible only by bridges, stood the royal palace and the great temple of Poseidon. And this wasn't just fancy for the sake of being fancy. Everything had a purpose. The circular design protected the core of the city like a fortress. The canals weren't just beautiful, they allowed for water transport throughout the entire capital. Fresh water flowed from underground springs, and the soil was said to be so fertile, the Atlanteans could grow crops year-round. The island was also rich, absurdly rich. Plato described the land as glittering with precious metals, gold, silver, even a mysterious red ore called orichalcum, second only to gold in value. The buildings were decorated with the stuff. Walls were covered in metals that reflected the sun. Temples were plated in ivory and precious stones. And the palace? That was the jewel of it all, with baths, gardens, fountains, and ceilings lined with gold. The Atlanteans had technology too, far ahead of their time. They mastered irrigation, architecture, and maybe even electricity, though that's still speculation. Some researchers believe the temples and canals may have functioned like giant power systems or even sound-based energy grids, similar to theories around ancient Egypt or South American civilizations. And then there were the animals. Plato mentions that the Atlanteans raised elephants, bulls, and an entire population of exotic creatures, something more advanced than any other Bronze Age civilization. They had racetracks, gymnasiums, and massive halls where they trained their armies. They were warriors, engineers, artists, and philosophers, all in one. It sounds like a dream, right? Almost too perfect. And that's what makes the mystery so powerful. Because if a city like that really existed, if all of this wasn't just a metaphor or a myth, then it would completely rewrite everything we know about human history. But it also raises more questions than answers. How did such a sophisticated society build all this thousands of years before the pyramids? Where did they get their knowledge? And if they were so advanced, why did they fall? Whether Atlantis was a real city or just an ancient parable, the details left behind by Plato are oddly consistent, uncannily vivid, and still puzzling scientists to this day. Because stories fade, legends get exaggerated. But something about the layout, the symmetry, the engineering, the materials, it feels specific, like a memory carved into words, a message passed down through time, waiting for us to understand it. And maybe, just maybe, someone, somewhere, is getting closer to the truth. If Atlantis really existed, where did it go? That's the million-dollar question. And over the centuries, hundreds of theories have tried to answer it. Some believe Plato was being literal, that Atlantis was located just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, known today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This has led many to suspect the Azores, a group of islands in the Atlantic Ocean, as the remnants of the lost continent. After all, they sit on a mid-Atlantic ridge, a tectonic hotspot, exactly the kind of place that might be swallowed by the sea after a massive quake. Others point to Santorini, a Greek island once home to the Minoan civilization. Thousands of years ago, a catastrophic volcanic eruption wiped them out, creating floods, tsunamis, and total devastation. To some historians, this matches Plato's tale of sudden destruction. But there's a catch. Santorini isn't exactly beyond the Pillars of Hercules. So, was he being metaphorical? Then there's the wild theory that Atlantis was Antarctica. Yes, you heard that right. Some fringe researchers believe Earth's crust shifted in a process called pole reversal, moving Antarctica to its current frozen state and burying Atlantis under miles of ice. It sounds crazy, but satellite images have shown what look like ancient circular structures beneath the snow. And then comes the most recent contender, the Racha structure, also called the Eye of the Sahara, located in Mauritania, Africa. It's enormous, it's circular, it's remote, and it matches Plato's description almost too well. 3 rings of land and 2 of water, mountains to the north, a nearby sea in ancient times. Could this be the real thing? The truth is, we don't know. Maybe Atlantis was never a place on a map. Maybe it was a warning, a lesson about power, corruption, and what happens when we forget our values. But maybe, just maybe, Plato left us clues, not metaphors. And somewhere, beneath the ocean, or hidden in the desert. The ruins of the world's most famous lost city still wait to be discovered. It's been over 2,000 years since Plato first wrote about Atlantis, and yet the world still can't stop talking about it. Why? Why are we so obsessed with a city that may have never even existed? Maybe it's because Atlantis represents something deep within us, a symbol, a mirror. Think about it. It's the ultimate what-if story. What if there was once a civilization more advanced than anything we know? What if humans, thousands of years ago, had cracked the code of engineering, medicine, architecture, even energy? What if all of that knowledge was lost overnight? Atlantis forces us to imagine a version of history that isn't linear, where progress isn't guaranteed, where we rise but we can fall hard. It taps into a primal fear that no matter how powerful we become, nature, time, and our own pride can destroy everything. But it's not just fear that draws us in, it's hope. Hope that maybe, buried somewhere, there's proof that human beings were always capable of greatness, that we've done it before, and that we could do it again. For scientists and historians, Atlantis is a puzzle, a mystery begging to be solved. Every year, new expeditions search the oceans. New satellite scans map the Earth's hidden scars. Books, documentaries, and now even TikToks dissect every possible clue. And for every piece of evidence, there's always one more question. One more, what if? For dreamers, Atlantis is a utopia, a place where wisdom, beauty, technology, and harmony once coexisted. It gives us something to chase, a higher version of ourselves. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Plato wasn't trying to write history. Maybe he was giving us a warning wrapped in a vision to remind us what we could be and what we risk losing when greed, arrogance, and power take over. In the end, Atlantis might not be a lost city. It might be an idea, a compass, a challenge to future generations to build something better and not repeat the mistakes of the past. Because if a civilization like Atlantis ever did exist, then it means we've already reached the top of the mountain once before, and if not, then maybe it's time we build one. Not in stone, but in the way we treat the world and each other. Either way, the legend lives on, not just beneath the sea, but in our minds and in our search for truth, wonder, and something greater than ourselves.